días. Continuando con el programa del día de hoy, a nombre del señor embajador de la UNESCO, Jorge Herrera Ramos, y chairman del World Congress of Neurosurgery, UNESCO ASPNet, Walter E. Dandy, in honor of Professor Yaşargil, a quien agradecemos por la organización de este magno evento, así como a la doctora Deyanira Capi Casillas, chairman del capítulo ASPN, al doctor Salim Abdul Raouf, chairman de Walter E. Dandy Neurosurgical Society, al doctor Babak Kateb, chairman de la Society for Brain Mapping and Therapeutics y de Brain Mapping Foundation, todos ellos vice-chairmans del comité organizador, y al doctor Parménides Guadarrama Ortiz, chairman del Centro Especializado de Neurocirugía y Neurociencias México. Es para mí un honor presentar la siguiente ponencia a cargo del doctor Hussain Alkhrsany, miembro de la Asociación de Neurociencias en Rumania, estudiante de la Universidad de Medicina y Farmacia Carol Dávila de Bucarest, Rumania, quien nos hablará el día de hoy de cómo la demencia y el Alzheimer transforman nuestro cerebro. Dr. Christopher, le cedo la palabra.
Thank you very much, Doctor. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. I am Dr. Christopher Burton. It is my pleasure to open today's presentation. This Congress is held in honor of Professor Gazi Yaşargil. And on behalf of our distinguished organizers, I would like to welcome you to the third week of the World Congress of Neurosurgery, part of UNESCO and the Walter E. Dandy Society. George Herrera Ramos, Ambassador of the UNESCO ASPNet and President of the World Congress, the Vice President, Dr. Deyanira Capi, President of the AANS IPN Chapter, Dr. Salim Abdul Raouf, President of the Walter E. Dandy Neurosurgical Society, Dr. Babak Kateb, President of the Society for Brain Mapping and Therapeutics, Brain Mapping Foundation, and Honorary Chairman of the Committee, along with Professor Nasser Al-Gandur, Professor Marcus Rotter, and also to Dr. Parménides Guadarrama Ortiz, Director of the Specialized Center for Neurosurgery and Neurosciences of Mexico. We would like to thank you all for organizing this event. It is my pleasure to welcome today's moderator, Dr. Bianca Budu.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christopher Burton. It is my pleasure to be here. I want to thank all of the members of the Congress that made this possible. It is my honor to present today's speaker, Dr. Hussain Alkhrsany, member of the Romanian Association of Neuroscience, student at Carol Dávila University of Medicine and Pharmacy, with the topic Unforgettable, How Dementia and Alzheimer Transforms Our Brain. Welcome, Dr. Hussain Alkhrsany. Whenever you're ready, you may start.
All right. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Dr. Bianca Budu. I would like to take a moment to say that I feel very honored and grateful to be here today. And I want to thank all the coordinators who have organized this Congress. And to have a chance to speak about dementia and the Alzheimer transform, or how dementia and Alzheimer transform our brain. So just let me present out my presentation. Just a second. Sorry, just let me know if you see my presentation.
Yes, we see everything, Doctor.
Okay, is it good?
Perfect.
All right. So first of all, I would like to start my presentation with a quote from a Spanish and Mexican filmmaker, Luis Buñuel. He said, "You have to begin to lose your memory, if only in bits and pieces, to realize that memory is what makes our lives. Life without memory is no life at all. Our memory is our reasons, our feeling, even our action. Without it, we are nothing." Now here I would like to talk about the three main types of memory, which are sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. The long-term memory is divided into two, the explicit memory and the implicit memory. The explicit memory is divided into two as well, the episodic and semantic memory. Well, first of all, sensory memories hold the sensor information for very brief of time, usually 1 second or less. The processing of the memory and other information begins in this type of memory. When a specific sensory experience becomes relevant, such as a smell of something in the kitchen, it might move to other type of memory, as you see in the picture. If a person pays attention to a sensory input, then the information may move to the short-term memory and then to the long-term memory. Otherwise, sensory memories are very short-term and person quickly forgot them. For example, a person will not recall all the specific sounds they heard after last 30 seconds or last 30 minutes, unless there is some reason to remember them. The short-term memory lasts seconds to hours, and it stores information temporally, and then either dismiss it or transform it to the long-term memory. It's also sometimes called working memory, although working memory is more specific to information that we receive, to use it quickly and then discard it. For example, a phone number or what you are going to buy from a market are stored in your short-term memory or your working memory for as long as it takes you to use it. Unfortunately, nowadays, our short-term memory is like, let's say it's our phones. We use it as short-term memory, but nothing more than that. Our long-term memories are a bit more complex than our short-term memories. Anything that happens more than a few minutes ago will be stored in a long-term memory, depending on how often we recall or use a certain piece of information. And the strength of the memory varies. The explicit memory are which you remember after consciously thinking about it. For example, the name of your childhood dog or your best friend's house address. There are three areas of the brain involved in the explicit memory: the hippocampus, the neocortex, and the amygdala. The second type of memory is the episodic memory, which are related to our own personal lives. For example, the day you get married, or even what you had for a dinner last night. Studies have shown that studies have shown that autobiographical or the episodic memories aren't necessarily accurate because we reconstruct them over time, and they change and depend on how new context in which we recall them. Our ability to retain episodic memory depends on how emotionally powerful the experience were. For example, the death of a family member, which involved a very powerful and emotional reaction. You would probably also have been very focused as it occurred. So we can say that when our brains are extremely focused, it becomes easier to process and store the sensory input, which is in turn makes it easier to later recall the experience. Somatic memory accounts for our general knowledge of the world. For example, the fact that sky is blue. Unlike the episodic memory, we are able to maintain the strength and the accuracy for our semantic memory over time. As we age, it begins to decline slowly. The last one is the implicit memory. Implicit memory is the second major type of the long-term memory, and it comprises the memories that you don't have to consciously recall. For example, let's say riding a bike or speaking a language, even though it takes, even though it may require a lot of conscious thought while learning the language, at some point it becomes automatically. Here I will just talk about the hippocampus. It's a part of the limbic system which involved in our behavioral and emotional responses, especially when it comes to behaviors we need to survive. For example, feeding or fight and flight response. It can be found under the cerebral cortex and above the brainstem, and it comes as a pair, as you can see here. It reassembles the shape of a curved seahorse and is essentially the memory center of our brain. The hippocampus is one side of the brain where new neurons are made from adult stream cells. The process is called neurogenesis, and it's based on one type of brain plasticity. So it's not surprising. This is a key brain structure for learning new things. Here, I just want to mention one very interesting case about a patient called Henry Malaysian, which is very popular or known case. He hits his head when he was 9 years old, which caused epileptic fit shortly after. After starting having over 10 epileptic fits a day, which made it almost impossible for him to have any type of life, until he met Dr. William Scoville, who believed that removing a Henry's hippocampus from his brain could help. Although Henry was very nervous, and he agreed to the surgery, which changed not only his life, but neuroscience forever. In 1953, Henry Malaysian had his hippocampus removed, and he was only 27 years old. Once he was out of the surgery, doctors start to realize there was something incredibly wrong. Although Henry's epilepsy seems to be gone, Henry could not longer make memories. He had what doctors call several anterograde amnesia. Anterograde amnesia is basically inability to develop and keep new memories. All memories that have been stored as long-term memories are retained, but they are not clear to recollection. Immediately after the surgery, Henry could recall all of his old memories from before the surgery without a major problem, of course, but even the simplest new memories were lost to him. He couldn't remember what he ate for lunch or recall the name of the doctor he just met. So now, why was this sad case such a miracle for neurology? Sorry. Well, due to Henry's new conditions and amnesia, he becomes one of the most studied men in history. Eventually, they called patient HM because they didn't want to tell his name. He was analyzed and studied for over 50 years of his life until he died at age of 82. Henry never really agreed age in his mind, always behaved like 27 years old man he was when he came out of the surgery. However, when he saw himself in the mirror, he couldn't be surprised. He didn't really seem to be overly emotional about anything as he grew older. Due to this constant study of Henry, doctors were able to learn what the hippocampus actually does. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that takes a short-term memory and move them to the long-term memory. Without this crucial piece, a brain cannot make long-term memories at all. Here you can see pictures, arrangement from A to C through a temporal loop of the HM shown in the left, and 60 years old man who has served as a control subject in the right. Sections were controlled brain selected to match as closely as possible the level illustrated form, HM's brain. Images from HM are more recent 3D quantization in which 3.2 millimeter sections were reconstructed. The control brain illustrates the structure that are likely to have been eliminated in HM's brain at each costrocaudal level. Here you can see the amygdala and entorhinal cortex are heavily damaged at this level. The collateral sulcus is barely visible, and little part of the perianal cortex is likely to be intact at this level. So here you can see the black dots, let's say. They mean that it's have been removed, or this part have been removed. In the second line, this is the rostral level of the intravertical portion of the hippocampus, which is missing filtering in the HM, and the entorhinal cortex is almost missing at this level because the collateral sulcus is visible. It's possible that the perianal cortex is intact at this level. The medial mammillary nucleus is present at this level and appears to be slightly shrunken in the HM. This is a rostral level through the body of the intraventricular hippocampal formation. Most of the hippocampal formation, including the entorhinal cortex, is missing at this level in the HM. So now you might be wondering, how are memories formed? Sorry. Well, memory is a reactivation of a specific group of neurons formed presents change in the strength of conditions between neurons. The sympathetic plasticity is the change that occurs in the synapse, the junction between the neurons that allows them to communicate. Word plasticity is ability of the brain to change adapt to new information. These conditions can be made stronger or weaker depending on when and how often you have to be activation in this path. A connection between two neurons becomes stronger when a neuron A constantly active neuron B, making it fire an action potential or spike, and the action gets weaker if neuron A constantly fails to make a neuron B fire a spike. Lasting increasing and decreasing in the synaptic strength are called long-term potentiation, or the LTB, and long-term deprivation, LTD. As you all know, after a neuron fires an action potential, there are three main steps to a synaptic transformation. Neurons transmitter released, binding to the neurotransmitter post-synaptic receptors. Sorry. And opening of the ion channels in the postsynaptic neuron, which allows the electrical currents to flow in or out of the cell. As seen in the diagram below, synaptic plasticity can change either the amount of neuron transmitters released or the number of the postsynaptic receptors available here. Both have affected of the alternative of how much electrical current flows through the ion channel. In other words, these processes change the synaptic strength. Here, memory are stored by changing the connections between neurons. A 5-year-old children will activate a certain group of neurons, as you can see here, whereas adults will activate a different announcement ball with the same stimulus. Synaptic plasticity driven by a repeated experience can change and connection strength between neurons. This is how there can be a different neuron response to the same input. Here, when we talk about memory disorder, it's like basically a damage to the certain part of the brain and reduce the ability to store or remember memories. And its impact the capability and social behaviors, abilities to solve problem, and then the ability to perform a basic task. Memory loss could be for a short period and then resolve, and it depends on the cause because it may get worse over time. It might result of from a new injury or present in after an injury. For example, a dementia, stroke, cancer treatment, so on. Memory loss may happen with the mental health issues as well. After, for example, after a big traumatic or stressful event or depression. Here you can, if we start talking about amnesia, amnesia is a deficit in memory caused by brain damage or disease, but it can also caused by temporarily by the use of various sedative or hypnotic drugs, typically associated with the damage of the medial temporal lobe. The memory can be either wholly or partly lost due to the extent of the damage that was caused. For example, a surgical removal or drugs, infections. Here you can see the two different pictures: healthy brain and amnesiastic brain. Here, the prototypical example of the several bilateral hippocampal anteriorly present in this cohort of amnestic patients. Here we have another case about amnesia, and it's about a patient called Clave Waring, who had like memory for like a very short time. So in 1985, a man named Clave Waring, who was a musician, and he's suffering from a rare combination combination of anterograde amnesia, which means he can't create new memories, as well as retrograde amnesia. That means he lost many of his memories. For him, life is somewhere between consciousness and dream. His memories from his life before the 1985 are very few, and he knew that he had or has children and loves his wife, but that's basically it. He don't have anything much. It's all start nearly 30 years ago when he constructed a herpes virus that attacked the nerve system. That effects of the illness were so great that now he lacks the ability to forming new memories. And he also cannot recall aspects of his past memories. According to his wife, his memory lasts between 7 to 30 seconds only. Every day, he feels that he just wake up and he feel like great. And according to the reports from the the BBC, each time that he sees his wife, he greets her with pleasure, and this because he genuinely believes that he has not seen her in years, even though she may have just left for a moment. Similarly, they report that when he goes out for a dinner with his wife, he can remember the name of the food, for example, chicken. However, he cannot link it with the taste, as he forgot what the food he is eating by the time he has reached his mouth. In his case, the affected areas are hippocampus, as we told before, which is very, very important structure to handling memories. And other affected areas are like the temporal lobe and the frontal lobe, which control the emotions. Here, if we talk about the traumatic brain injury, or the TBI, it's basically like a damage triggered by outside force, and it's classified as of focal brain damage due to contract injury, resulting in deep cuts and intracranial hemorrhage, or a diffuse brain damage to acceleration or declaration injuries type, resulting in diffuse axonal injury or brain swelling. Outcome from head injury is demonstrated by two different stages or mechanisms. First one is the primary insult or the primary damage, which occurring at the moment of the impact. In treatment terms, this type of injury is very sensitive to permanent but therapeutic measures, but not therapeutic measures. The second part or second stage, it's represent running in the pathological processes intended at the moment of the injury. We delay the clinical presentations. In treatment terms, these types of injury are sensitive as well, to the therapeutic innovation. Now, if we talk about dementia, dementia, first of all, is a syndrome. It's not a disease. And there are more than 100 dementia-related illnesses. And it's progressive, which means it's getting worse over time. And there are a lot of signs of dementia. For example, memory loss, or changing in the mood or behavior, disorientation of time, place, and people, language problems, decreases in concentration, and so on. Here, I just wanna mention that, first of all, dementia is not normal aging of the brain. So normal aging may mean slower processing speeds and more difficulty with the multitasking, but routine memory skills and knowledge are stable and may even improve with the age. What's not normal is being not able to complete a task by yourself, or having difficulty with the naming items, or forgetting the function of the items. Also, repeating questions and misplacing items frequently might be a sign of dementia. Although almost as you can see, almost 6 million people in the US have dementia, and as you can see, with the increasing of the age, the prevalence percents increase here. So after getting over 85 years old, 1 in 3 might have 33% have chance to get dementia. If we talk about dementia types, we have let's say the 4 main types. First one is the vascular dementia. Second one is the Lewy body dementia. And third one is the frontotemporal dementia. And last one, or the fourth one, is Alzheimer disease. Alzheimer disease basically is as you can see here, it's almost 64% of all cases of dementia. Also, the vascular dementia is 16% of all cases. So here we talk about the vascular dementia. Basically, it's caused by lack of blood flow in the brain, and it might come with a multi-infarct or post-stroke dementia. As you can see here in the picture, these white dots here are like sign of post-stroke dementia. The lack of the oxygen and blood can damage the brain. It can be caused by, let's say, the isomatic or the hemorrhagic infection after many areas of the brain, and it's linked with the Alzheimer disease. The causes might be aging, diabetes, stroke, smoking, cardiovascular diseases, and so on. The vascular dementia, on the other hand, the symptoms after stroke are attention issues, orientation issues, general showing of progressing ability, difficulty in shifting sets, and difficulty in thinking. There is no available treatment, unfortunately, that could repeat the damage of the VD or the vascular dementia. Controlling the risk factors may increase the damage to the brain vessels or the blood vessels. Here you can see a SPECT picture or SPECT image. Sorry. SPECT image of the brain in vascular dementia showing multi-patchy preformation defense. Here, the second type is the Lewy body dementia, and it's also a progressive dementia, and leads to decline in the thinking and mental ability in general, and caused by protein deposits that develop in nerve cells in the brain regions that involve in thinking, memory, and movement. It's also blocked messages in the brain and reduce the level of chemical messages and cause nerve cells to die. The symptoms are like, let's say, memory loss, slow movement and tremors, change in the alertness and attention, and the affected regions in the brain for the Lewy body dementia are like, let's say, the first one is the cerebral cortex, and the limbic cortex, also the hippocampus, the midbrain and basal ganglia, and the brainstem. If we take a picture or if we take an MRI, unfortunately, until today, MRI pictures cannot diagnose, let's say, the Lewy body dementia. You can't see the difference. But in other hand, like here in the picture, you can see like the different and the absence of the significant medial temporal lobe atrophy, which can like tell you that you might have Lewy body dementia. The frontotemporal dementia are brain disorders that primarily affect the frontal and temporal lobe of the brain, and it's make the brain to shrink. These areas are linked with the behavior, language, and personality. And it's also a progressive disorder, and unfortunately it gets worse over time, and patient with the frontotemporal dementia might live about 10 years only, and also there is no cure or treatment that slow or stop the FTD, sorry. Here, if we talk about Alzheimer disease, first of all, it's a progressive disease and gets worse over time as well. And between 60 to 80 of dementia patients have the ATD, and more than 5 million Americans have it. The cause and the cure of this disease is unknown, and as I've told before, AD and dementia is not normal aging of the brain. Here, of course, you can see the difference between the two. Here, if we talk or continue talking about numbers, every 72 seconds we got a new case of the AD, and 1 in 2 people over 85 years old get the AD, which means like half, and almost 10 million people in the US caring for a person with the AD or related dementia. Here, there is like theories or like studies that trying to find whether the AD is a genetic or not. Well, first of all, family history is not necessary for the individual to develop Alzheimer disease. However, research has shown that those who have a parent or spleening with Alzheimer are more likely to develop the disease than those who do not have at the first degree related with the Alzheimer. There are 3 single genes mutations associated with an early onset Alzheimer disease, or the first stage, or the early stage, sorry. First one is the APP, which found in the chromosome 21. The second one is the BCEN1, which found in the 14 chromosome, and the BCEN2, which found in the first chromosome. And also the mutation in these genes result in the production of abnormal proteins that are associated with this disease. We have also another gene which called the APOE, and the gene itself is involved in making a protein that helps carrying cholesterol and other types of fats in the bloodstream, and it comes in several different forms. Each person inherits 2 APO alleles, one from each biological parent. We have here the 3 types. The first one is the APOE2, which is relatively rare and may provide some protection against this disease. If Alzheimer disease occurs in a person with this allele, it's usually developed later in life than it won't in someone with the APOE4 gene, for example. The APOE3 is the most common allele, and it's believed that it's play a neutral role in the disease, which means like neither decrease nor increase the risk. And of course, the last one, the APOE4, which increases the risk of Alzheimer disease, and it's also associated with an early age of disease onset. Having 1 or 2 APOE4 alleles increase the risk of developing Alzheimer disease for about 25%. So the disease is associated with the development of neurofibrillary tangle and black holes. The brain has 1 billion of neurons, of course, and in order to remain stable, neurons must communicate with each other, carry out metabolisms, and rebuild themselves. AD disrupt all these essential jobs. Here you can see basically we have the neurons, like healthy neurons, and here neurons with the Alzheimer brain. And here basically we have the amyloid plaques, which like block the connections between neurons, which like leads to cell death. Now here we have like three main stages of development of the Alzheimer disease. The early stage, which like lasts 2 to 4 years in duration. The middle stage, which is 2 to 10 years in duration, and the last stage or the late stage, 1 to 3 years in duration. The early stage, you can notice in the entorhinal cortex, then the processes of the hippocampus, and the affected areas are begun to shrink as nerve cell dies. Changing can be 10 to 10 years before symptoms occur. And of course, memory loss is the first symptom of the AD. It's like simple like that. This middle stage, it's like basically after spreading through the brain, the cerebral cortex began to shrink more and neurons stop working and die. The sign can be include like memory loss, confusion, poor judgment, mood changes, and increased anxiety. The signs can include increasing, as I mentioned, difficulty with the language and thoughts also. And here with the MRI images, it's present like a Alzheimer disease stage, where here is non-dementia or demented. Here in the P is very mild dementia. Here is mild dementia. And here in the last picture is the moderate dementia. The late stage of the AD, it's like extreme shrinkage happened in the brain. Patients are entirely dependent on other cares, and symptoms include, for example, weight loss, skin infections, increasing sleeping, loss of bladder and bowel control, several disorientation to time and place, no short-term memory, loss of speech, and the last one that it's no longer recognize the family member. And here in these pictures, in the MCI and the early AD, the atrophy, it seems primarily in the enterocortex or the entorhinal cortex and the hippocampus. As the AD progress as the progress is the out of separates to the rest of the middle temporal loop, and the parahippocampal and the temporal pole Eventually, atrophy progresses to the rest of the cortex, primarily in the temporal and parietal and the frontal lobes. Also, the late stage of the AD can affect the occipital lobe, and it might affect your vision as well. So here I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope it was clear.
Thank you very much, Doctor. If it's all right with you, I would like to ask some questions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I was asking myself while you were talking and presenting the Alzheimer's disease, how does it actually affect our brain?
Well, basically, the brain typically shrink to some degree in the health aging, but surprisingly does not lose neurons in large numbers. In Alzheimer's disease, however, the damage is widespread as many neurons stop functioning or lost the connection with the other neurons and die. So Alzheimer's disrupts processes is the key to the neurons and their network, including the communication, metabolism, and the repair. At first, Alzheimer's disease typically destroys neurons and their connections in parts of the brain involved in memory, including the hippocampus. It late affected areas in the cortex or the cerebral cortex, and it's responsible for language, as I've mentioned before, and social behavior. Eventually, many of other areas of the brain are damaged, and over time, a person with Alzheimer's disease generally lose his or her ability to live and function independently. So you're gonna need others' help.
Thank you. I would have another question. Is the brain of the patient of HM patient, is it still being studied? Yeah. Is it still used and studied?
Yeah. Well, after HM's death, matter of fact, in 2008, the doctors collect and cut the patient's brain and frozen the brain, and then they cut it into 2,401 slides, and each slide is 0.07 millimeters thick, and they took pictures of every slide and create a high resolution 3D model of his brain. And this 3D model, let's say, it's still people or neurosciences use it to teach, or when they mention this this case.
Thank you very much. I would like to say again, thank you to the members of the Congress who participated and helped us doing this amazing Congress, and to the people who are watching and doctors, of course. I wish you a good day or good night. Thank you very much.